Hello, Gravitrons. I'm more gravity. Let's play chess. Okay, we'll go over this game since it was accurate and mostly also good. But I'm actually going to play the position out to checkmate. White's going to checkmate black soon enough. I could push this pawn and have my queen and move after. I think I make things even more difficult for black with pawn to b3. Probably captures and captures. And actually this pawn is now free as a first go, and have a backup pawn in case wild beasts attack. Pawn to d8 equals queen. Okay. Probably play here. Let me just see something here. When the rook moves to c5, why not b takes c5? So let's actually back that up. I mean, black will still lose. Perhaps distance to mate or something sometimes dictates those. Excuse me, dictates those. Yeah, so here I like queen to a3. Keep things rather nice and neat here. Actually, as we have black's king held in place, this might not work because of a6. But the idea I'm going to try is h7, then on a6 we try queen to or pawn to h8 equals queen, and then we almost get a checkmate along the diagonal, rather this light square diagonal, and the king's going to move out from underneath it, but that's not a problem. We have the firepower and then some. Still a mate in two. This should do the trick. There we have our checkmate, finally. It's a silly thing, but when you see pawns like this, it's not something I usually do, but I've seen other players attempt to either run out of clock or confuse the player by just more or less running either clockwise or counterclockwise around a pawn cover that has this diagonal relationship. It works even better if they're like here and here, d4 and e5. I'll tell you, it's the last gasp of dying hope, but sometimes it runs out your opponent's clock trying to figure out how to contain the king from moving to a wrong place, rather than just another check, another check, another check, another check, like that. Like sometimes there's cases where you actually have to stop and say the checks aren't working. He's evading the checks over and over again. He has a system where he can continually evade the checks. So you have to think, well, maybe I want to play to a square like d6 or c6, where the king has to move, but not out of the way of a check. So, kind of a weird thing. Sort of on the edge of gamesmanship and sportsmanship. At any rate, this game's going to be almost as accurate as the game as it actually were. But I like to keep checkmate as an anchor to where those accuracy ratings are tied. It makes for a better comparison. You can understand what a low accuracy means in a very open and tactical game against perhaps a low accuracy in a solid game with a lot of pawns remaining on their starting squares, or whatever what have you. But how accuracy sometimes is influenced by game type: open, tactical, strategic, closed, all those things. Many moves, few moves. So here we have this game was very accurate. I'm very proud of that. And let's go ahead and see how I was able to do black in. C4, knight C3. Right, so these are like common, sometimes these are called waterfall moves in the English opening. You get this pawn structure here, you might get a pawn on C5 in some cases. Somebody picks off a corner move here so that knight G5 and bishop G5 aren't available, or here on A6. White can do it if he sheer they want to. White can do it if he wants to. But this is sometimes called a waterfall opening. You know, the bishop's going to E2 sooner or later. The other bishop might find a home at E3 where it's backed up by a pawn, and there's different ways, different positions arise from these, but they're all sort of within the comfort of this extended English opening nexus. Knight to D4. Castles kingside. Knight takes E2. Queen takes E2. Just good, accurate opening moves. Both sides are staking a claim for themselves in the center. There's a lot going on. I like the pin here by black on the F3 knight. Of course, I am gonna put the question to the bishop. This is called putting the question to the bishop. Whenever you have like here, it's fine. But now the bishop's on G4, and if I play H3 here, it's putting the question to the bishop. It would be the same if I had a bishop on G5 and black played H6. If I had a bishop on B5 and black played A6. If my opponent had a bishop on B4 and I played A3. Those moves are putting the question to the bishop. It helps to know some of these chess player parlances. So when you go to the club and somebody's going over a great game you played, you know what they mean. Like, this was the best move of the game. Here you put the question to the bishop, but there was calculation behind it. Whatever the reviewer is reviewing with you, or you reviewing with the reviewer, putting the question to the bishop. H3, and then the opponent moves out of the way. I decided to delay G4, mostly out of respect for the queen's ability to enter the king side quick enough. Not right now, because this square is covered twice and this square is covered. But I'm looking at, a move like queen H4, and that could damage, and then she might follow up with damage on the H3 square. So I didn't push G4 right away yet. Bishop to D4 is a little slow. I've mostly ignored bishop to D4. I had no reason to fear bishop takes E3. After F takes E3, then doesn't white have soon enough attacking chances on the black's king side via mostly the F file. I instead played pawn to G4. We're going to look at why Torch suggests a different move. Torch wants this to happen right away, and you definitely can. White captures, pawn captures. Just be very careful. You're not touching that knight, staying right where he is. Well, as long as he's pinned, remember. But the knight on C3 can move to B5, can move to D5. Other moves for that knight aren't as good. These moves aren't really helpful. But pretty much D5 looks strong, especially since now the E3 square is vacant. There's a pawn on D4, but yeah, maybe knight to B5 might put pressure on that pawn. Black has to respond in some way to cover it, and you'd have to calculate those. But at D5, there's the great square on E3, so I'm not sure. I'm not sure whether knight to B5 or knight to D5 would be best there. Let's play that out on practice. So as per Torch's suggestion, okay, black has something different in mind. Well, let's go with it. And this is all why bishop to d4 was not the greatest move for black. I'm thinking either knight to d5 or knight to b4. Okay, well, there's some additional considerations. To protect d4 means the piece goes past white's knight. What about a6? And we're going back to a3, kind of off the beat path, like a knight on the rim is grim kind of thing, but it's not all that bad. I mean, it'll cost a couple moves to get him into play still, but it's not all that bad. Anyway. Knight b5 was best. How was knight d5 was in the accuracy? So knight b5 was best. And after that, I'm just picking up this pawn. Not like that. I don't know how that happened. Alright. Well, we're up a pawn. I don't understand why black wouldn't, at this point, protect that pawn. Guess there's some tactics that expose black's king on the queen side here. Alright, I dig. Yeah, this is quite worse for black than just giving up the d4 pawn. Okay. Let's go back to as Torch suggests, and we see that even with capturing the d4 pawn and not trying to hold on, and black not trying to hold on to it, white's doing well here. He's up a pawn of material, safe king. His pieces are out and influencing the board. He's got the best center out of the two sides by far. His pawns the pawns have been moved are doing work. They're doing duty. They're helping. His knight is right here, on d4, and it's very versatile. Can move in one direction or another direction. Right, so he's influencing play. The rooks are connected. White's doing well here. Okay, we go back to the stem game, and I pushed g4 instead of the better move that Torch suggested of bishop takes d4. I pushed g4 that requires black to respond, otherwise losing a bishop for a pawn. Torch suggests knight takes c3, so maybe you want to take a look at that yourself. I'll move along away from that, and now knight takes d4. Something in my calculating had this idea that my bishop on e3 had to take on d4 to avoid a pawn fork. And I realize here, yeah, the pawn fork can come and go because there's nothing protecting the pawn trying to fork these two pieces. So my bishop just undermines things with bishop takes d4. Actually gone up. We start with the knight exchange. We start with knight takes d4. And then after e takes d4, bishop takes d4. White has won the minor exchange and a pawn. Knight to f6 receives criticism from the reviewing computer. I mean, yeah, I agree. Maybe it's not such a great move, but what else? White is so strongly in control of much of Black's territory. You know, this Black is so cramped, and developing the knight's the way to go, especially in front of the g7 pawn to block bishop takes g7 with initiative against the h8 rook. It's just, this inaccuracy is born out of the fact of where Black has chosen to place his, her, they pieces and the tactics that ensued. You wouldn't put the knight to e7 and allow White to capture the pawn on g7 without moving the knight to f6. Then how is Black on a kingside castle? You put the queen on a square and she is maybe taking a little bit too long, then maybe a castle queenside, but I don't know. It's hard to if knight f6 is the problem, it's hard to say what fixes it. If knight f6 is a problem, how does Black take that move back and make a better one? Well, since I'm criticizing so heavily, let's look at what Torch says. Instead of knight f6, Torch wants f6. Right? So now there's no tactic on the g7 pawn. The knight's still on his starting square. Yeah, it's a little better. It's a little bit better here to play f6. Okay, but knight f6 was played, and I wanted to create a really strong battery on the e-file. And kind of just, at some point, just plow through or barrel through the center. Now my opponent was wise to castle before that happened, before I started plowing through the center. And I'm looking for, excluding Black's bishop, f5 could come at almost any time, and then the bishop moves back to h7. So losing a tempo of initiative, but also his mobility is extremely limited, and we'll see that plays a role later on in the game. The queen moves to h4, and like I said, f5, controlling and attacking Black's g6 bishop. Bishop moves, and White prepares in a manner so as to be flexible against his initial plan on the e-file. White prepares queen to g2. Some accurate moves, and this, you have to, if you're wondering which pawn to capture here, please, my friends, capture towards the center, capture into the discovered attack. You're going to have your attack be more successful that way than keep a queen bumping at the square where this pawn might be. So captured towards the center, directly into a check against Black. My opponent made this move, which is not good. The computer considers this move good. No, don't get confused, because the king's in check needs to move out of the way here. With queen to g5, rook to g3, and there's no way for the queen to step out of the pin. She's going to be lost. This is actually a skewer. It's not really a pin, but yeah, this is a type of attack known as a skewer. Queen legally, by the rules of chess, cannot move out of the way. So I think my opponent initiated the exchanges, which is as good as anything else. But now White has a 5-point material advantage. So please, 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 do not consider queen to g5 a good move. Not to be critical, but that it's the losing move of the game. Okay, now we have queen takes g3 check. And look at me pointing all these fingers at queen g5 like that, and we'll also being understanding it at a different point in time. But then knight to f6. Knight to f6 is no good. I'm going to lose my queen. Why would I have played knight to f6? This knight's sitting here, completely protected knight to f6, and white loses a queen and a knight for 2 rooks. Now I still have the exchange and a pawn beyond that, but knight to f6 was not the move. And we'll just watch this as this plays out. I'm isolating pieces here that have bad mobility, and then here becomes like a race because of how much time's on the clock. I think the game ended already in the as it were proper, and that this was played out against computer. Yeah, so the game ended here with white about to promote. But I wanted to show something. So that's that. I want to show. I'm going to go back in time. Why knight to f6 was so silly? It drops the queen, or a queen and a knight for 2 rooks. Silly. So instead of that, keep the knight at this great square. How about queen takes d6, and now we're up material from before instead of behind. So that's the thing. Whoops, I don't like these. Not that they're bad. They're just so practice and finish this out. This will be the last discussion of my games for tonight. So probably going to have my king escape towards the center there. In this kind of position, we can sacrifice the queen. There's quite enough extra material for white to force a win here. Yeah, I was just talking about this, right? Okay, there it is. A wonderful and great chess game played out to checkmate with all the trappings of high accuracy, fun, complications, interesting positions, and so on. And we lost a little bit of accuracy, but we made things complete and got the number. That's another indication of how accurate the game was when played to finish. All right. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you, Gravitrons. Unmore Gravity. Have a great night.